The airplane sat on the runway, its engines humming softly as it prepared for takeoff. Inside the cabin, passengers shuffled to their seats, stowing bags in overhead compartments and settling in for the long flight from New York to Los Angeles. First class was quieter than the rest of the plane, with only a handful of people seated in the plush leather chairs. Among them was Lisa Carter, a confident and poised woman in her early 30s. She had just closed a major deal for her tech company, securing millions in funding for an innovative AI project that could change the world. For once, she allowed herself to relax, leaning back in her seat and sipping a glass of sparkling water. Lisa was dressed professionally but comfortably, wearing a tailored blazer and dark jeans. Her presence commanded respect, though she rarely sought attention. As she glanced out the window at the busy airport, she felt a sense of pride. Years of hard work and determination had brought her here, not just to this luxurious seat, but to a place where she could make a real difference. But little did she know, her day was about to take an unexpected turn. Just as the last passengers were finding their seats, the cockpit door opened and Eric Dawson stepped out. He was tall, with broad shoulders and neatly trimmed hair, exuding the kind of confidence that bordered on arrogance. Eric was the pilot of the flight, and he often liked to walk through the cabin before takeoff to greet passengers personally. To many, this might have seemed charming or professional, but those who knew him well understood it was more about showing off than genuine hospitality. Eric scanned the first-class section, his eyes narrowing slightly as they landed on Lisa. He didn't recognize her, which wasn't surprising since she preferred staying out of the spotlight. But something about her bothered him. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself, as if she belonged there. Or maybe it was the expensive watch on her wrist and the sleek laptop sitting on the tray table in front of her. Whatever it was, Eric decided almost instantly that she didn't fit his idea of what a first-class passenger should look like. "Excuse me," Eric said, approaching Lisa's seat with a forced smile. His tone was polite enough, but there was an edge to it that made her glance up from her book. "I couldn't help but notice you're traveling alone." Lisa raised an eyebrow, unsure where this conversation was going. "Yes, I am," she replied coolly, closing her book and setting it aside. Eric nodded, his lips curling into a smirk. "Interesting. Most people in first class are either business travelers or couples celebrating special occasions. Are you sure you're in the right section?" The question hung in the air, sharp and condescending. Lisa blinked, taken aback by his rudeness. She hadn't expected such blatant disrespect, especially not from someone in his position. Still, she kept her composure, refusing to let him rattle her. "I booked my ticket just like everyone else," she said evenly, "and I'm quite certain I belong here." Eric chuckled, though there was no warmth in it. "Of course," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I suppose money can buy anything these days, even a seat in first class." Some of the nearby passengers exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension building between the two. A middle-aged man sitting across the aisle shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while a young woman typing on her phone paused to watch the exchange. No one spoke up, but the atmosphere grew heavier with each passing second. Lisa leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes locking onto Eric's. There was no anger in her expression, only calm determination. "If you're suggesting I don't deserve to be here, then perhaps you'd like to explain why you think that," she said, her voice steady and measured. "Is it because I'm black, or because you assume I'm not wealthy enough to afford this seat?" Her words hit their mark, catching Eric off guard. For a moment he faltered, his confident facade cracking ever so slightly. But instead of apologizing or backing down, he doubled down on his behavior. "I didn't say anything about race," he snapped, his voice rising slightly. "But let's be honest, some people are just trying too hard to impress others. Maybe you should focus on earning your success instead of flaunting it." The comment stung, but Lisa refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her upset. Instead, she smiled faintly, her expression unreadable. "Success isn't something you earn once and forget about," she said. "It's something you build every single day. And trust me, Mr. Dawson, I've worked harder than most people will ever understand to get where I am." Eric opened his mouth to retort, but before he could say anything, the intercom crackled to life. The co-pilot's voice came over the speakers, announcing that the plane was ready for departure. Passengers were instructed to fasten their seatbelts and prepare for takeoff. With a final sneer, Eric turned on his heel and headed back toward the cockpit, leaving Lisa to sit in silence. As the plane began taxiing down the runway, Lisa stared out the window, her thoughts swirling. She wasn't surprised by Eric's attitude. She had encountered people like him before. What bothered her was how easily he dismissed her, reducing her to stereotypes and assumptions without even knowing her name. Still, she reminded herself that his opinion didn't define her worth. She had faced bigger challenges in her life and come out stronger every time. Unbeknownst to anyone on board, including Lisa, the events of the next few hours would test her strength in ways she couldn't imagine. For now, however, the plane lifted smoothly into the sky, carrying its passengers toward their destination, and toward a confrontation that would change all of their lives forever. The plane climbed steadily into the sky, leaving behind the bustling city below. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, blending with the soft murmurs of passengers chatting or settling in for the long flight. Lisa leaned back in her seat, trying to push Eric Dawson's words out of her mind. She had dealt with prejudice before, but his condescending attitude still lingered like a bad taste in her mouth. Still, she reminded herself that he wasn't worth her energy. She reached for her laptop, determined to focus on work instead. Just as she opened her laptop, the plane hit a patch of turbulence. It wasn't severe, just enough to rattle the cups in the drink holders and make a few passengers grip their armrests, but it was enough to interrupt the calm. Lisa glanced at the seatbelt sign, which had lit up again, and fastened hers securely. She didn't think much of it. Turbulence was common, especially during takeoff. But moments later, the shaking grew stronger, jolting the entire aircraft. Passengers exchanged nervous glances as the plane rocked from side to side. A baby started crying in coach and someone dropped a book, the sound echoing through the cabin. The turbulence wasn't just uncomfortable. It felt unusual, almost violent. Even seasoned travelers began to look uneasy. Lisa tightened her grip, on the armrests, her heart pounding. Something about this felt wrong. In the cockpit, Eric Dawson gripped the controls, his earlier arrogance replaced by sharp focus. He muttered instructions to the co-pilot, a younger man named Ryan who looked pale under the fluorescent lights. "We need to stabilize," Eric said, his voice tense. "Check the systems. See if there's an issue." Ryan tapped frantically at the instrument panel, his fingers flying over buttons and switches. "I'm not seeing anything obvious," he replied, his voice trembling. "But we're losing altitude fast." Eric cursed under his breath, his knuckles white as he fought to keep the plane level. Outside the windshield, dark clouds loomed, ominously, swirling around the aircraft like a stormy sea. Alarms began blaring inside the cockpit, their shrill tones piercing the air. Red warning lights flashed across the dashboard, signaling a critical failure in one of the plane's systems. Whatever was happening, it was serious. Back in first class, Lisa felt the shift before anyone else did. Her neural implant, a small device embedded at the base of her skull, was already interfacing with the plane's onboard computer. She hadn't intended to use it. The connection happened automatically when the turbulence began. Through the implant, she could sense the chaos unfolding within the plane's systems. Data streams flooded her mind. Erratic readings from the altimeter, conflicting signals from the navigation system, and a cascade of errors that pointed to a catastrophic malfunction. Lisa's eyes widened as she processed the information. This wasn't just turbulence. It was a full-blown emergency. The plane's autopilot system had failed, and the backup systems were struggling to compensate. If something wasn't done soon, they would lose control entirely. Without thinking, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, ignoring the protests of nearby passengers. "Miss, please sit down." A flight attendant called out, rushing toward her. "It's not safe." "I know what I'm doing," Lisa said firmly, her voice cutting through the noise. "Trust me." Before the flight attendant could stop her, Lisa moved quickly to the front of the cabin. She spotted a maintenance port near the galley, a small panel used by technicians to access the plane's internal systems. Kneeling down, she pulled out a compact tool from her bag and opened the panel. Inside was a tangle of wires and circuits, glowing faintly in the dim light. "What are you doing?" the flight attendant demanded, hovering anxiously behind her. "You can't touch that." Lisa ignored her hands moving with practiced precision. Her neural implant allowed her to communicate directly with the plane's computer, bypassing traditional interfaces. As she worked, lines of code scrolled across her vision, invisible to everyone else. She identified the source of the problem, almost instantly. A corrupted algorithm in the navigation software likely caused by interference from the storm outside. It was a rare glitch, but one that could be fixed if she acted fast. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Eric was losing hope. Despite his years of experience, he couldn't figure out why the plane wasn't responding to his commands. Every adjustment he made seemed to make things worse. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he wrestled with the controls, his confidence crumbling under the weight of the situation. "We're going down," Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible over the alarms. "We're not going to make it." "No," Eric snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. "We'll find a way. There has to be." His words were cut short as the intercom crackled to life. "Attention, crew." Lisa's calm voice came over the speakers. "This is Lisa Carter in first class. I've accessed the plane's systems and identified the issue. Please remain calm, I'm working to fix it." For a moment there was silence in the cockpit. Eric stared at the intercom in disbelief. Who was this woman, and how had she managed to access the plane's systems? Before he could process what was happening, the turbulence began to ease. The plane steadied slightly, its descent slowing as Lisa's adjustments took effect. "How is this possible?" Ryan asked, his eyes wide with awe. "Who is she?" Eric clenched his jaw, his pride wounded as much as his ego. He wanted to dismiss her actions, to insist that only trained professionals should handle such matters. But deep down he knew they owed her their lives. Without her intervention, they might have crashed. For the first time in years, Eric felt truly powerless, and it terrified him. In first class, passengers watched in stunned silence as Lisa worked. Some whispered prayers, while others simply stared, unable to comprehend what was happening. When the turbulence finally subsided, a collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin. Lisa closed the maintenance panel and stood up, brushing her hands against her jeans. She looked exhausted but resolute. "You saved us," the flight attendant said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you." Lisa nodded, though she didn't seek gratitude. "Let's get everyone safely on the ground," she said quietly. Then she returned to her seat, sinking into the plush leather chair as the adrenaline faded. Outside the window, the storm clouds began to break, revealing patches of blue sky. It was a small victory, but one that reminded her of the resilience of both machines and people. As the plane descended toward Los Angeles, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Passengers talked excitedly among themselves, recounting the terrifying ordeal and marveling at Lisa's quick thinking. In the cockpit, Eric sat in grim silence, his thoughts a whirlwind of shame and regret. He had mocked Lisa earlier, dismissing her as unworthy of her seat in first class. Now she had proven herself to be far more capable than he could ever imagine. When the plane finally touched down, cheers erupted throughout the cabin. Passengers clapped and hugged one another, grateful to be alive. Lisa remained quiet, watching, as ground crews surrounded the aircraft. She knew the aftermath of this incident would be complicated, but for now, she allowed herself a moment of peace. She had faced danger head-on and emerged victorious. Not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. Little did she know the world was about to learn her name. The plane taxied slowly toward the gate, its engines winding down as passengers eagerly unbuckled their seatbelts. The tension that had gripped the cabin during the emergency began to ease, replaced by a mix of relief and excitement. People hugged strangers, shared stories, and thanked whoever was nearby for making it through the ordeal alive. In first class, Lisa sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap. She wasn't looking for attention or praise. She just wanted to step off the plane and move on with her life. But as the doors opened and passengers began filing out, Lisa realized that wasn't going to happen. Reporters and airport staff were waiting at the gate, cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward. Word of the mid-air emergency had spread quickly, and news outlets were already calling it a miracle landing. What they didn't know yet, what no one outside the plane knew, was that Lisa Carter was the one who had saved them all. "Miss Carter," a reporter called out as Lisa stepped off the plane. "Can we have a word? Did you really fix the plane?" Lisa hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden attention. She hadn't expected this kind of reception, but she understood why it was happening. The passengers behind her were spilling details about what had happened, recounting how she had taken charge when things seemed hopeless. One man even shouted, "She saved us! That woman right there!" Reluctantly, Lisa stopped and turned to face the reporters. "I did what I could," she said simply, her voice calm but firm. "It wasn't just me, it was a team effort." Her modest response only fueled the growing admiration for her. Within minutes, social media was ablaze with posts about Lisa's bravery. Videos captured by passengers during the flight showed her kneeling by the maintenance panel, working tirelessly to stabilize the aircraft. Hashtags like "Chew Hero on Flight 456" and "Sure Lisa Carter Saved Us" started trending nationwide. People praised not only her technical skills, but also her courage under pressure. Meanwhile, Eric Dawson was having a very different experience. As the pilot, he was required to stay on board until federal investigators arrived to inspect the plane and review the incident. He sat alone in the cockpit, staring blankly at the controls. His mind raced with thoughts of what had gone wrong and how his career might never recover. News of Eric's earlier behavior toward Lisa had leaked almost immediately after the flight landed. A passenger had recorded him mocking her in first class and uploaded the video online. By the time investigators boarded the plane, the clip had millions of views, sparking outrage across the internet. Viewers condemned Eric's arrogance and prejudice, accusing him of treating Lisa unfairly because of her race. Comments flooded social media, calling for his resignation and demanding accountability from the airline. When the investigators finally entered the cockpit, Eric tried to explain himself. He admitted that the situation had spiraled out of control due to a software glitch, but insisted that he had done everything possible to regain control of the plane. "I'm just grateful everyone made it safely to the ground," he said, attempting to sound humble. But his words fell flat, especially when one of the investigators mentioned the viral video. "We're aware of the footage showing your interaction with Ms. Carter," the lead investigator said, his tone stern. "Care to comment on that?" Eric shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "It was a misunderstanding," he muttered. "I didn't mean any harm. I was stressed and I misspoke." The investigator raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. At least not yet. For now, their priority was determining the cause of the malfunction and ensuring the plane was safe to fly again. Still, Eric knew this was only the beginning of his troubles. The airline suspended him pending a full investigation, and sponsors who had once endorsed him began pulling out of deals. Friends and colleagues distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with someone labeled as prejudiced and unprofessional. Back at the terminal, Lisa found herself surrounded by well-wishers and curious onlookers. Some thanked her profusely, while others asked for selfies or autographs. She handled it all graciously, though she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being put on display. It wasn't fame she wanted, it was fairness. She hoped the attention would highlight the importance of diversity in fields like technology and aviation, where women of color were often overlooked or underestimated. That evening, Lisa returned to her hotel room, exhausted but unable to sleep. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, interview requests, messages of support, and invitations to speak at conferences. She scrolled through them absently, pausing when she came across a particularly harsh tweet directed at Eric. Someone had posted a screenshot of his smug expression from the viral video, alongside a caption that read, "This is why racism has no place in the skies." Lisa frowned, setting her phone aside. While she didn't condone Eric's behavior, she also didn't believe in piling hatred onto someone who had already made a mistake. She knew what it felt like to be judged unfairly, and she didn't wish that pain on anyone, not even him. Still, she recognized that Eric's actions reflected a larger issue, one that needed to be addressed if real change was ever going to happen. The next morning, Lisa agreed to give a brief statement to the press. Standing before a crowd of reporters, she spoke clearly and confidently. "What happened yesterday was a reminder that we all have a responsibility to treat each other with respect," she said. "No matter who you are or where you come from, your value isn't defined by someone else's assumptions. And when we work together with kindness and understanding, we can overcome even the toughest challenges." Her words resonated deeply, earning her even more praise. News outlets hailed her as a role model, highlighting not only her technical expertise but also her grace under fire. Meanwhile, Eric's reputation continued to crumble. Interviews he gave in an attempt to defend himself only made matters worse. When asked about his comments to Lisa, he stumbled over his answers, unable to offer a sincere apology. Instead, he blamed stress and fatigue, claiming he hadn't meant to offend anyone. Public opinion turned against him completely. Articles dissected his career, pointing out past complaints from passengers and co-workers who had accused him of arrogance and bias. Memes mocking his downfall spread across social media, turning him into a symbol of unchecked privilege. For Eric, it was a humiliating fall from grace, one that left him questioning whether he would ever fly again. As the days passed, Lisa focused on using her newfound platform for good. She accepted invitations to speak at tech conferences and universities, sharing her story and encouraging young people, especially women of color, to pursue careers in STEM. She partnered with organizations dedicated to promoting diversity in science and engineering, donating part of her company's profits to scholarships and mentorship programs. Through it all, she remained humble, refusing to let the attention go to her head. One evening, as she prepared for another speaking engagement, Lisa received a message from an old friend. "You've inspired so many people," the message read. "Keep shining, Lisa. The world needs more voices like yours." Lisa smiled softly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she was ready to face it. For every challenge she encountered, she reminded herself of the strength she had shown aboard Flight 456 and the countless others who would rise up alongside her. Unbeknownst to Lisa, Eric was grappling with his own challenges. Stripped of his position and ostracized by his peers, he struggled to find work in the aviation industry. His attempts to rebuild his life were met with rejection at every turn. Friends stopped answering his calls, and acquaintances avoided him in public. Even his family grew distant, tired of hearing excuses instead of apologies. One night, sitting alone in his apartment, Eric stared at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. He replayed the events of the flight in his mind, cringing at the memory of his words to Lisa. He realized now that his arrogance had blinded him, not just to her abilities but to the humanity of everyone around him. It was a painful lesson, one that would take time to learn. For Lisa, however, the future looked brighter than ever. As she stepped onto another plane weeks later, bound for a conference in San Francisco, she felt a sense of hope. This time, the captain, a woman named Angela, greeted her warmly before takeoff. "Thank you for everything you've done," Angela said, shaking Lisa's hand. "You're inspiring a lot of us to aim higher." Lisa smiled, settling into her seat as the plane soared into the sky. Somewhere above the clouds, she allowed herself to dream of a world where respect and equality prevailed, not just in the skies, but everywhere. Months had passed since the incident on Flight 456, but its impact lingered like ripples in a pond. For Eric Dawson, life had become a shadow of what it once was. Once celebrated as a skilled pilot with a bright future, he now found himself struggling to rebuild his shattered career. The airline that had employed him for over a decade terminated his contract after the investigation concluded. While the technical failure of the plane wasn't entirely his fault, his behavior toward Lisa Carter sealed his fate. Public opinion had turned against him so fiercely that no other airline dared hire him. Eric spent his days drifting from one odd job to another, trying to make ends meet. He worked as a delivery driver, stocked shelves at a local warehouse, and even took shifts cleaning offices late at night. Each day felt heavier than the last, not because of the physical labor, but because of the shame that followed him everywhere. Strangers recognized his face from the viral video, whispering behind his back or glaring openly. Friends who had once admired him avoided eye contact when they saw him in public. Even his family grew distant, tired of hearing excuses instead of genuine remorse. At first, Eric tried to fight back. He gave interviews to anyone who would listen, insisting that he wasn't racist and that his comments to Lisa were taken out of context. But the more he defended himself, the worse things got. People saw through his words, sensing the lack of sincerity behind them. Instead of earning sympathy, he alienated himself further. Eventually, he stopped talking to reporters altogether, retreating into silence and solitude. Late at night, when the world around him grew quiet, Eric often replayed the events of that fateful flight in his mind. He thought about Lisa, how calm and composed she had been despite his insults, how she had stepped up when everyone else was panicking. Her actions haunted him, not because they exposed his incompetence, but because they revealed his own smallness. He realized now that his arrogance hadn't just cost him his job, it had cost him his integrity. And yet, admitting that truth aloud felt impossible. Pride still clung to him like a second skin, refusing to let go. Meanwhile, Lisa Carter's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. After the flight, her name became synonymous with courage and innovation. She appeared on television shows, gave keynote speeches at major conferences, and collaborated with organizations working to close the gender and racial gaps in STEM fields. Her company's AI project gained unprecedented attention, attracting investors eager to support her vision of ethical technology. Yet despite her growing fame, Lisa remained grounded, always reminding herself why she had started this journey in the first place. One afternoon, Lisa sat in her office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, reviewing plans for a new initiative. It was called Horizon, a program designed to mentor young women of color interested in tech careers. Through workshops, internships, and scholarships, Horizon aimed to provide resources and opportunities that many lacked. Lisa poured her energy into the project, knowing firsthand how isolating it could feel to be underestimated or dismissed. As she worked, her assistant knocked gently on the door before stepping inside. "There's someone here to see you," she said hesitantly. "He says it's important." Lisa frowned, setting down her pen. "Who is it?" The assistant hesitated. "It's Eric Dawson." For a moment, Lisa didn't move. She hadn't seen or heard from Eric since the flight, nor had she expected to. Part of her wondered if this was some kind of cruel joke, or, worse, an attempt to exploit her goodwill for personal gain. But curiosity got the better of her and she nodded. "Send him in." When Eric walked into the room, Lisa barely recognized him. Gone was the confident man who had mocked her on the plane. In his place stood someone worn down by time and regret. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his failures, and his eyes carried a sadness that spoke louder than any apology ever could. "Thank you for seeing me," Eric said quietly, his voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve your time." Lisa studied him carefully, searching for signs of the arrogance she remembered. But all she saw was vulnerability. She gestured toward the chair across from her desk. "Sit," she said simply. Eric obeyed, perching awkwardly on the edge of the seat. He clasped his hands tightly together, as if afraid they might betray his nerves. "I came here to apologize," he began, his words slow and deliberate. "Not because I expect forgiveness, but because I owe it to you. What I said on the plane, it was wrong. I judged you based on assumptions, not facts, and I treated you like you didn't belong there, when the truth is, you belonged more than anyone else on that flight." Lisa listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When Eric finished, she leaned back in her chair, considering his words. Finally, she spoke. "Apologies are easy," she said. "Anyone can say they're sorry. But actions mean more than words. Have you changed, Eric, or are you just looking for redemption?" Her question hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. Eric flinched, knowing she was right. "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to change, but I'm not sure where to start." Lisa nodded, her gaze softening slightly. "Then start by listening. Listen to people who are different from you. Learn from their experiences, and remember that humility isn't weakness, it's strength." Eric swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything." After he left, Lisa returned to her work, though her mind kept drifting back to their conversation. She knew Eric's road to redemption wouldn't be easy, and that it wasn't her responsibility to guide him. Still, she hoped he would find a way to grow, not just for his sake, but for the sake of others who might benefit from his transformation. In the weeks that followed, Lisa continued to focus on her mission. Horizon launched successfully, drawing praise from educators, activists, and industry leaders alike. Young women from across the country applied to participate, eager to learn from mentors who believed in their potential. Lisa traveled frequently, speaking at events and meeting aspiring innovators who reminded her of herself at their age, determined, resilient, and hungry for change. As for Eric, he began volunteering at a community center, teaching aviation basics to children from underserved neighborhoods. At first, he doubted whether he had anything valuable to offer, but the kids responded warmly to his lessons, asking questions and sharing dreams of flying planes someday. Slowly, Eric found purpose again, not in commanding respect but in giving it. Though their lives had diverged dramatically, both Lisa and Eric carried the lessons of Flight 456 with them. For Lisa, it reinforced her belief in the power of perseverance and compassion. For Eric, it served as a painful reminder of the importance of humility and self-awareness. Together, albeit unknowingly, they contributed to a broader movement, one that sought to create a fairer, more inclusive world. And somewhere high above the clouds, another plane soared smoothly through the sky, carrying passengers whose stories were yet to unfold. A year had passed since the events of Flight 456. The world had moved on, as it always does, but the impact of that day lingered in subtle ways. Lisa Carter's name remained etched in public memory, not just as a hero who saved lives, but as a symbol of resilience and determination. Her initiative, Horizon, had grown into a nationwide program, inspiring countless young women to pursue careers in STEM fields. She traveled constantly, speaking at conferences, visiting schools, and meeting people whose lives she had touched. Yet despite her success, Lisa never lost sight of her roots. She stayed humble, reminding herself daily that true progress came, not from individual achievements, but from collective effort. For Eric Dawson, life had taken a quieter turn. After months of soul-searching and hard work, he finally began to rebuild his shattered identity. Volunteering at the community center gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Teaching kids about aviation reminded him why he had fallen in love with flying in the first place, not for the prestige or power, but for the joy of soaring beyond limits. Slowly, he earned their trust, learning as much from them as they did from him. One evening, as Eric packed up his materials, after a class, one of the students approached him shyly. "Mr. Dawson," the boy said, clutching a model airplane he had built during the session, "do you think I could be a pilot someday?" Eric smiled, kneeling down to meet the boy's gaze. "Absolutely," he replied. "But being a good pilot isn't just about flying planes. It's about respecting everyone around you, your crew, your passengers, and even yourself. If you can do that, there's no limit to what you can achieve." The boy grinned, his eyes lighting up with possibility. Watching him walk away, Eric felt a flicker of pride, not in himself, but in the future generations he was helping shape. For the first time in a long while, he believed he might still have something worthwhile to offer the world. Back in Los Angeles, Lisa prepared for another milestone event, an award ceremony honoring her contributions to technology and society. Dressed in a sleek navy blue dress, She stood backstage, reviewing her speech one last time. As she waited for her name to be called, she reflected on how far she'd come and how much farther there was to go. Despite the accolades and recognition, she knew the fight for equality wasn't over. There were still barriers to break, voices to amplify, and minds to change. When her name was announced, the room erupted in applause. Lisa stepped onto the stage, smiling warmly at the audience. She accepted the award graciously, then paused to gather her thoughts before speaking. "This honor doesn't belong to me alone," she began, her voice steady and clear. "It belongs to every person who has ever been told they don't belong, whether because of their race, gender, or background. To those who have faced prejudice and risen above it, this is for you." Her words resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation from the crowd. But Lisa wasn't finished. Lowering her tone slightly, she added, "I also want to acknowledge someone else tonight, a man named Eric Dawson who made some terrible mistakes but has since tried to make amends. Forgiveness isn't easy and neither is redemption. But if we truly believe in creating a better world, we must leave room for both." The mention of Eric's name drew murmurs from the audience, but Lisa didn't waver. She knew not everyone would agree with her decision to highlight his efforts, but she believed in second chances, for others and for herself. Growth, she often said, wasn't linear. It was messy and imperfect, like life itself. As Lisa returned to her seat, her phone buzzed with notifications. Social media lit up with reactions to her speech, ranging from praise to criticism. Some applauded her willingness to forgive, while others accused her of being too soft. But Lisa ignored the noise, focusing instead on the bigger picture. Change didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't happen without discomfort. By acknowledging Eric's journey, she hoped to inspire others to reflect on their own biases and perhaps take steps toward healing. That same night, Eric sat alone, in his small apartment, scrolling through news articles about the ceremony. When he saw Lisa's speech, his chest tightened with emotion. He hadn't expected her to mention him, let alone in such a positive light. Tears welled in his eyes as he read her words again and again, each line piercing deeper than the last. For so long he had carried the weight of his shame, convinced he didn't deserve forgiveness. But Lisa's gesture reminded him that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a better future. Determined to honor her faith in him, Eric decided to take his involvement at the community center to the next level. He reached out to local organizations, proposing partnerships to expand access to aviation education for underprivileged youth. His proposal gained traction quickly, thanks in part to the testimonials of parents and students who had benefited from his classes. Within months, the program grew exponentially, attracting volunteers, donors, and media attention. Lisa heard about Eric's progress through mutual acquaintances, though they hadn't spoken since his visit to her office. She followed his work from afar, quietly proud of the changes he had made. One day she received an invitation to attend a fundraising gala for the expanded aviation program. Hesitant at first, she ultimately decided to go, curious to see how far Eric had come. The gala was held in a modest community hall, decorated with handmade posters and model airplanes crafted by the students. As Lisa entered the room, she spotted Eric across the space chatting animatedly with a group of children. He looked different now, lighter, freer, as if the burdens he once carried had begun to lift. Catching sight of her, he excused himself and walked over, his expression nervous but hopeful. "Lisa," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." She shook his hand firmly, offering a small smile. "Congratulations, Eric. You've done incredible work here." He nodded, glancing around the room. "None of this would have been possible without your belief in me. I'll never forget that." "You earned it," Lisa replied simply. "Keep going, keep learning. That's all any of us can do." They parted ways shortly after, exchanging polite farewells. Though their interaction was brief, it left both of them with a renewed sense of purpose. For Lisa, it reinforced her commitment to fostering understanding and collaboration. For Eric, It served as a reminder that growth was a lifelong process, one that required patience, humility, and courage. In the months that followed, Lisa continued to advocate for diversity and inclusion, using her platform to uplift marginalized voices. She partnered with global organizations, launched new initiatives, and mentored aspiring innovators who looked to her as a role model. Her legacy extended far beyond the confines of Flight 456, shaping industries and communities in ways she could scarcely have imagined. Meanwhile, Eric dedicated himself fully to his work at the community center. Under his leadership, the aviation program flourished, reaching thousands of children across the country. Many of his students went on to pursue careers in aerospace engineering, piloting, and related fields, proving that dreams weren't bound by circumstance. Though he never flew commercially again, Eric found fulfillment in nurturing the next generation of aviators. Years later, when asked about the incident on Flight 456, Lisa spoke candidly. "It was a defining moment, yes, but not because of what happened. It was defining because of what came afterward. How we choose to respond to adversity reveals who we truly are." Eric echoed similar sentiments when reflecting on his journey. "I used to think my worth was tied to my title, to being a pilot. But I've learned that titles don't define us. Actions do. And every day I try to live in a way that honors the lessons I've learned." As their paths diverged further, Lisa and Eric remained connected by the shared experience that had changed their lives forever. They represented two sides of the same coin: resilience and redemption, courage and compassion. Together, albeit unknowingly, they contributed to a larger narrative, one of hope, healing, and humanity. And somewhere high above the clouds, another plane soared smoothly through the sky, carrying passengers whose stories were yet to unfold. Each flight was a testament to the endless possibilities of connection, growth, and transformation, the kind that happens not just in the skies, but within the hearts of those who dare to dream.